So over time, that transgender service.
Sure.
Please welcome Jeynce.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Bradley said, my name is Jeynce Poindexter, and I'm the transgender specialist / victim advocate for Equality Michigan. And I also have the distinct honor of being the Vice President of Communication and Organizing for Trans Sisters of Color Project. Trans Sisters of Color Project is different from Equality Michigan, but I tell you the major components to me. So for Equality Michigan, I get to speak and advocate for the entire LGBTQ community as a whole, and that includes two-spirited, that includes gender non-conforming, or non-binary identified community members as well. But specifically with Trans Sisters of Color Project, that agency was started and built off the violence and murder of trans women of color in the city of Detroit over 10 years ago. And we continue to have an uphill battle and journey with that fight because our lives are not valued. When we look at the structure of what family is supposed to be a loving, supportive unit that helps you grow and kind of adds to your person and your character and whomever you are. But I think what people fail to realize is that oftentimes within our family structure, we're ousted, we're kicked out, so we don't get to enjoy holidays, and we don't have birthdays, and our lives are literally dismissed, and we're told what we shouldn't be, what we're not gonna be, where we have no place, and what we will never amount to. So you imagine pushing through and trying to live and navigate through life, being told that right from the very beginning of the confusion that you may be experiencing yourself, because you have to wonder and figure out how to arrive and navigate through a world that continues to tell you what you're not. So you don't have a particular seat at the table because you're not even honored as a human being first. So then we live in Michigan, which is an at-will state. So that means that I can be fired and evicted from my housing just because I'm LGBTQ. And you can best believe that I serve a lot of survivors and community members who face those realities every day. And this is just because you're a community member. So that means that tomorrow when I go home, if my landlord decides that I no longer want a trans person at my property, they can kick me out. And I can go and tell the police, I can hire the best lawyer that my money can buy, and there's nothing that I can do about it, simply because that person can say, well, it's kind of my religious stand. I don't want them here. When that's not the message that I received in the Bible. The message that I received in the Bible, and I'm a preacher's kid, the message that I received in the Bible is that love will cover a multitude of sin. So I'm often offended when someone tells me that their discrimination and their hatred is built on religious standpoints, because I know the God that I serve. I know the God that has rendered a favorable amount of grace and mercy that has saved all of us. And if you're telling me that that same powerful God does not have the ability to save me and give me grace and give me mercy, that means that you're calling God a liar, and you have to deal with that. That's what it means to me. My journey, my life, it has not always been easy, but I had faith. I never left faith. I did leave home when I was about 14 because, again, this is confusion. And I myself, I was not raped and sexually assaulted. That's not what pushed my transition or pushed my identity or my gender. That's not what pushed it. What pushed it was I wondered and struggled how to make my body catch up with my mind and my spirit. Since I was a child, I knew I felt different. I knew that there was something different about me, and I didn't know what it was. And trying to figure out what it was caused me a lot of confusion. So imagine trying to tell a child to then translate that to an adult that automatically feels like, oh no, not in my house. Oh no, you don't have a place here. So that means that you won't stop and listen to me. You won't stop and honor the things that I'm telling you, when the first thing that a parent does is say, oh, please tell me if something is wrong. But when I do, how will you respond? Will you respond? Will you hear me? Or will you just go on with things as you know them and that you've been taught them? And I think that's honestly what we're going to have to do as well, is come to the grips and come to the truth that our parents and those before us may have made some mistakes about the way that they raised us, about the things that they told us, about the things that we experienced and we were told to shut up and be quiet about. It's a known fact throughout the African American community, you don't talk about what goes on in the house, and you don't share what goes on in the house. So you pack in all that trauma, all that pain, all that abuse, and you're instinctively told to be quiet about it and carry it around. But go to school, where then you go to school and you're picked on because you're different. And you're ostracized again because you're different. So you try to go and talk to a counselor, or you try to go and talk to a peer or a person at school. And then if they're facetious or they just want to joke, then they go spread it around the school. Lo and behold, that you get an attendance officer or a school teacher or an adult that's not welcoming, that hasn't been brought up to speed on how to respond or a proper way to respond, and then that's a negative interaction. So everyone that I've bumped into in my life's journey, from kid, home, school, professional, service providers, all the steps along the way, I have to educate about how to love me and acknowledge me. But I'm still supposed to show up in the best way possible as well. And you think about that. You think about when you're a kid, if you're that responsible to manage and navigate life on that level and still be okay. And lo and behold, you have some feelings where you're coming to yourself and you're identifying, and then you say, well, maybe, okay, this is for me. I'll speak from an I standpoint. For me, I was young, I had these feelings, and I'm saying, Lord, what is going on? Like, why do I live in a world that speaks death to me? I encounter church people who are supposed to encourage me and build me up, and they tell me that I'm an abomination, and that there is no place for me also within faith. But then I read the word and I learn for myself that there's only one abomination that you're not being forgiven for, and that's replacing the Lord. So then I'm unpacking and I'm dealing all of this, and I'm a preacher's kid, and I'm still trying to be happy and still trying to love on my family and go to school and do right by school because my mom paid good money. I went to private school. And still trying to figure out, like, what does life mean for me? And I'm struggling, and I'm kind of lost, and I'm going about things. So I leave home when I'm about 14, because I'm also a Taurus. My birthday is April the 22nd, and I don't take kindly to people telling me what I can't do and what I'm not going to be. And there was some rifts between me and my mom, and it was the problem there. And she's a Cancer, so she had her own, thoughts about how life should be, and Cancers are very bold in their approach. And so we bumped heads a lot, and we bumped heads to the point where I said, okay, this is enough for me. So I left, I went over my sisters, I went to some friends, and I tried to figure out life. And along the way, I would got some bumps and some bruises, but I kept the Lord with me. I kept my faith with me, and I never let that go. And I believe and I know that that's what has carried me through and that brought me through life. And I know some people probably won't understand that, but I'm not interested in making you believe, because my life is a testimony. And if you knew what I knew, if you knew the places that I was in those times where I was alone and I had no one, and I was out on the street and I thought less of myself, if you knew the way that the Lord brought me up and out, you would understand. But I don't believe that it's my responsibility to go in depths to try to make you understand. What I can only say is that God is good to all of us, and He loves all of us. And you have to really understand, when you understand faith, you understand the power of love. And my bishop always says, you can't save them if you don't catch them first. So you got to catch the people in order to give them salvation and justification and encourage them. And that means that you might have to go against what you believe is right or wrong to try to look at something from a different vantage point so that you can render the best services to people and help change a little bit bad of life into a little bit of joy, a little bit of hope, a little bit of positivity, especially for a kid. Kids remember, and oftentimes kids get pushed to the side and it's like, oh, you're just a kid, you don't know any better. You know, I tell you, I remember everything about my growing up. I remember painful things, I remember joys, I remember sorrows, I remember deaths. I remember times when I stood by my mom and I wouldn't leave her side because I just felt like she needed a protector and I didn't want to go to school. And I didn't understand that because I'm growing up, going through life. And then my mom told me that when I first was born, I was kept in the hospital for 6 months. So when I finally got a chance to come home, she kept me every single day up under her. So that was my need as I was growing up, to kind of stay beside her. And all of those things I kind of instinctively remember. And I also remember the painful things of where her mind could not wrap around my level of understanding and my level of progression in life. And where I was silenced and I was pushed away and I was looked at as a kid. But here I am literally crying and begging out for the help that you told me to cry out for. But I'm not getting a response. And I'm trying to still deal with that from a family aspect, and then I go on through life. You go to services, you go to the hospital, you go to just get some care. And everything about life is different for me. And it's different for me at the hands of who's ever rendering those services. If I get a person who's pleasant or who's just good at their job, I may have a good day. If I get a person who wants to be difficult, who wants to give me a hard time, then by all means, I feel that. And I work every day. I pay my part to this society. And digging and learning and growing and kind of educating myself, I realized that as a taxpayer, I'm entitled to representation. So there should be a trans or LGBTQ council member or state representative or state senator because we pay taxes. Also, I think of that as well. Now, we're alike for you to come in my check and pay taxes. But when it requires a quality of life for me that is standard for everyone else, that's where it gets shaky. That's really, really something for me to navigate in here because, like I said, I look at my checks. I'm seeing my bank account. I'm knowing what I'm paying into society and doing my part every single day. And then I go to a hospital and I'll have a service provider tell a trans woman or trans man that they will not render them services because they don't have to. That's wrong. You do have to, according to the professional oath that you took.
And to piggyback off of that, sorry, because we're getting low on time. I wanted to, number one, bring forth this quote. Dr. Craig's Beverly, "There is a human floor in which no one should fall below." Just think about that for a minute. I got on the board of directors at the Ruth Ellis Center with a lot of intentionality. One of the reasons I was working with JJ 2020 when it was like a 20-year plan, not next year. So I started way back then in some of my work, and it was interesting to me that in our juvenile detention facilities, what we were doing at that time was putting transgender people in orange jumpsuits and having them sleep on the floor in between floors in the stairwell for their safety. You know, I did a lot of work with the Domestic Violence Sexual Assault Organization in Lansing. We did some trans-inclusive for policy and trans-inclusive research. And when I went around the state and talked to shelter providers for domestic violence and sexual assault, it was very interesting to me that they were, "Oh, we can't have trans people in the shelter." And I said, "Oh, so your $10 an hour staff are checking parts? Because if I pass, I'm getting in shelter." So we never know. So I go back to that teaching privacy. All women, cis and trans, should have their own space in a juvenile detention facility to dress, to take a shower, to create their own safety space that may have not been given to them as it should have. So we're getting really close to the end of time.